Chapter: Piki Motorbikes. The most common war wound in Maasai country is a dainty exhaust pipe burn. Almost every day, a proud warrior would swing by, hitch up his shuka, and show off a fresh bacon strip on his shin. This happened with such clock-like regularity that I started to suspect the motorbikes had joined the great machine versus human uprising and were quietly slow-roasting Maasai for lunch. Naturally, my theory has a few loose bolts. If the bike actually ate its rider, who would sit on the saddle next? More to the point, who would pour in the petrol? The poor thing would keel over from hunger. I'm taking that as solid evidence that the artificial brainpower of Chinese motorbikes isn't quite up to scratch. Yet. There were roughly 4 flavors of non-motorized transport in Mbogoi: the bicycle, the donkey, the trusty foot, and small humans who shot downhill on homemade carts hammered together from a few planks. Otherwise, everyone, everywhere, buzzed around on motorbikes. I did bump into the odd car. Each Thursday, a lorry called Fuso lumbered in for market day. Now and then a passenger car materialized, as if it had parachuted in. I even saw a yellow Jeep Wrangler parked in one boma, a 3-liter 6-cylinder monument to self-indulgence. With Tanzanian petrol prices, that beast is so thirsty its owners had to take a cow to Handeni, sell the cow in town, and bankroll the fuel for the trip home. Motorbikes reign for one brutally obvious reason. The potholes are deep enough to swallow mid-sized mammals. A truck needed 8 shovel-wielding diggers on board. A family saloon traveled with at least 2, just in case it disappeared into the abyss. While I was in Africa, the Chinese, handsomely aided by local Swahili, widened and smoothed most of the main road to Handeni. They even finished 5 of the 8 bridges, so you could finally drive straight across instead of playing scenic detours. I'm itching to see how the whole show copes once the rains start hammering. So, motorbikes. They make perfect pothole-proof sense. I may be repeating myself, but motorbikes, identical down to the last bolt, actually come in 2 flavors: Piki and Boda. A Piki is just a plain garden variety motorcycle. A Boda is the very same plain garden variety motorcycle with one crucial upgrade. The rider hands you a bill at the end. Think family car versus taxi. Because rules in Tanzania, especially in Mbogoi, are as scarce as penguins in the Sahara, any Piki can morph into a Boda the instant money changes hands. No atomic miracles or 1.5 million regulations required. The standard head count per bike is 2 or 3. 4 is nothing special, and I once clocked 5, though 3 of them were children, which probably doesn't count. Besides hauling people, bikes double as delivery trucks. Picture a scene from a slice-of-life art film. A battered track shoots down a dusty, potholed lane. Up front is the driver, behind him 2 50-kilo sacks of maize flour. On top of the sacks perches a beaming Swahili lad poking a full meter into the sky. Each time the back wheel drops into a crater, the passenger, sacks and all, cheerfully trampolines 30 or 40 centimeters. It looks like terrific fun from a safe distance. Or try this on for size. A refrigerator delivered to our house from Handeni, 40 kilometers away, by motorbike, over a dirt road. Nobody out there pretends safety is a thing. Helmets, gloves, knee pads, exhaust shields. Why bother when the key protective measure is that the rider spends at least 3/4 of the journey actually looking at the road? That'll do nicely. To be fair, on trips to Handeni, everyone does slap on a helmet. The police nag them into it. Failing that, they blast the horn for a heroic age before every 3rd blind bend. Same effect, apparently. William is the textbook proof that all those safety gadgets are surplus to requirements. Minus helmet and body armor, he managed to meet another bike head-on in a corner, lounge for several painfully expensive days in hospital, total his motorcycle, spend a fortnight puffed up like an inflatable hippo, limp about theatrically, and still grin because he wasn't dead. Tiny life pleasures like that would only be spurned by a madman, or by a Mzungu white bloke. There were hordes of motorbikes buzzing about, each one dressed up in its own quirky paint job. Yet every single bike was the exact same model. Same engine, same frame, all packing a mighty 125 cubic centimeters, which back home we reserve for kids who've outgrown pedal bikes but aren't tall enough for the big leagues. Despite the shrimp-sized engine, the bike itself was a whopper. Extra long seat, purpose-built for moving more humans than the manual politely suggests. One rider? Fine. Two? Sure. Three? Why not? Four? Now we're talking about Maasai carpool. Just as the district boasted only one breed of dog, the universal brown, medium-sized, one-style-fits-all African mutt, so every motorcycle was a clone of its neighbor. I assume this was nature's way of balancing out the riot of clothing and ideas Africa otherwise throws at you. Naturally, they were Chinese machines, brutally simple and, as I discovered, absurdly durable. A shiny new one cost about $1,000 in euros. A pre-dented veteran could be yours for 300. My favorite feature was the soundtrack. Each bike chugged like a tractor fresh from its annual spa day. I kept cracking the same hilarious joke. Whenever a rider puttered past, I'd ask why he'd come on a tractor instead of a motorbike. Comedy gold, right? Wrong. Nobody laughed except me. First, they didn't get it. Second, irony is a language they simply don't speak. We finally booked Sekinoi's bike into the spa. Bits were bailing out mid-ride, and the poor thing was starting to look like a yard sale on wheels. No trouble finding a workshop. Aloys runs a parts store, and propped against his shop front is an awning under which our mate Koikai keeps his one-man garage. Koikai treated the machine to a full makeover. New valves, engine out, frame straightened, handle fixed, oil changed, chain greased, whole lot bolted back together. Price tag for parts and labor? 80,000 Tanzanian shillings, about 25 euros at the time. Back home, you pay more than that just for saying good morning at the reception desk of a car service. One last tech tidbit. When Koikai swapped the air filter, a dead mouse fell out. A quality control inspector if ever I saw one. Back home, a typical Saturday afternoon biker, provided it isn't too chilly or, heaven forbid, too warm, wheels his machine out of the garage, the same bike he's polished 50 times this month alone, thunders a whole 40 kilometers, sinks 3 cappuccinos, tucks the bike back into its shed, and resumes polishing for another month. Should he fancy an upgrade, he'll drop half the bike's value on what is essentially a different exhaust pipe, or a bit of plastic in a mood-lifting color. In Tanzania, things leaned gloriously the other way. Swahili ingenuity, Maasai flair, Chinese pragmatism, and judging by some details, possibly the local poultry, all pitched in. The hardcore centerpiece was a hand-painted fuel tank. Subjects varied, usually boldly figurative. Most bikes sported a little plastic maker's plate on the front mudguard, facing forward like the mascots on Edwardian automobiles. The most popular badge boasted the proud name T Better. Curiously, those plates, utterly pointless save for advertising, were almost never redesigned by their owners. The runaway tuning cliché was a plastic zip tie fastened to the front rack, fluttering in the breeze like a budget victory ribbon. Boundaries? None whatsoever. My favorite mod was the supersized rear mudguard extension meant to keep flying muck off following traffic. Some were 10 times bigger than the original part and carried war paint slogans. Top of the pops. This is a motorbike. The big guns, and I do mean big, the sort of chaps who measure their charisma in centimeters of ground clearance, like our friend Munikiti, rode lifted bikes propped up on giraffe leg shock absorbers. They looked like lean, mean off-roaders. In reality, they were the exact same Chinese 125s everyone else thrashed to death. His mate Simba owned the identical show pony until his English girlfriend accumulated a distressing collection of leg fractures. After that, he bought a stock machine, melted into the polyester gray of mediocrity, and was never heard revving above the herd again. Naturally, the new wheels still flaunted half-bald knobbies and the usual plastic tassels, because tradition matters, and the real heavy hitters, really heavy, monstrously heavy, like Munikiti, equipped their rear-view mirrors with built-in loudspeakers. Because if your exhaust note doesn't say legend, your Spotify playlist will. I'm a card-carrying bike nerd and love snooping around for the latest two-wheeled gimmicks, but I'd never clapped eyes on anything this bonkers. After all, who needs rearview mirrors when you can wedge loudspeakers into them? The next deluxe flourish was a talking motorbike. I blame the Chinese for that stroke of brilliance. The machine rolled out of the factory already fluent in English, and because it's better to see once than sprint to the loo twice, I insisted on a full demonstration. Because the nearest petrol station lurked 40 kilometers away in Handeni, the locals solved the fuel problem in their own inimitable style. Wire cages stuffed with 1-liter bottles of petrol lined the verge, which meant every shop and street food stall doubled as a miniature filling station. All motorized life shared a charming habit. They bought just enough petrol to get somewhere. I witnessed this firsthand on a run to Handeni. We packed an entire liter, an extravagantly low reading on the gauge, and set off. About 5 kilometers outside Mbogoi, we found a bike parked by the track. We stopped. 2 minutes later, a Maasai bloke burst out of the bush waving a mobile phone. Running out of fuel on the open road happens all the time, but it's ridiculously easy to sort. And no, you're right, there's practically zero signal out here, so the phone is about as useful as a snorkel in the Sahara. It's possible the Maasai possess an inner map for mobile-friendly clearings, the same way they can feel prime grazing land in their bones. How much signal there is, and where? Can't swear to it, never asked. When your tank finally wheezes dry, you simply flag down the next person heading into the nearest village, tell him to track down your mate, and ask that mate to find someone on a bike coming your way, who then brings you a splash of petrol, sorted, fuel prices, first the arithmetic. In Mbogoi, a take-home of 100,000 Tanzanian shillings already counts as a fat paycheck. A liter of petrol costs about 3,700 shillings. Result? Our well-paid hero can spend an entire month's wage on a princely 27 liters of fuel. Do the same trick with your own salary. Divide it by 27 and, ta-da, you've got your very own Lengusero pump price. Let's lowball it. If somebody back home made a neat 1,000 euros a month, a single liter would ring up at 37 euros. Pretty sure Western civilization would fold faster than a cheap deck chair. Not the Maasai. No drama, no flailing, no meltdown. They'll ride a motorbike for a 50-meter errand without blinking. Run out of petrol? Then there's no petrol. Nothing breaks. Cash will show up one day, petrol will follow, and off they'll zoom the 100 meters to a mate's place. Engine growling like a pampered tractor. I took the motorbike out now and then, but not too often. Short trips from the village to the boma and back, with 3 people jammed on a trail full of half-meter craters, I usually left to trained professionals. Longer journeys to Handeni sparked a philosophical disagreement. On one side, the police, who held the firm belief that a Mzungu, white guy, is infinitely wealthy, and therefore should contribute generously to their personal financial well-being. On the other side, me, firm in my conviction that I was broke, skint, and not handing over a single shilling. So most of my scenic tours around Lengusero were enjoyed from the pillion seat. We rode to Handeni several times to shop or sort things out, and I always rode with Alois. On our very first ride, I discovered that Alois is, in theory, a very sensible man, until he climbs onto a motorbike and hits the open road, at which point his common sense stays behind with the chickens. We bounced along to the strained roar of an overworked engine, while his weapon of choice, a rumgu, the traditional club every self-respecting Maasai carries, kept trying to crawl into my shoe. Then, as we crested one of the many glorious humps of the natural road, the rumgu's rounded tip smacked me squarely between the legs. Twice. Masochists of the world, unite. And please, enlighten me. What exactly is the appeal? But honestly, it wasn't all that bad. That evening, as we sat around sipping beer, Sekinoy asked why I hadn't told Alois to slow down. I said I'd actually enjoyed the ride, so why would I? Bad move. Alois was sitting right there. The next trip to Handeni went fairly smoothly. Getting there. The way back? Punishment, pure and simple. Alois had knocked back 5 beers, night had fallen, but to him, That just screamed perfect riding conditions. He swung onto the saddle, fired up the bike, and off we roared. I clung on for dear life, the bike bucked like a caffeinated goat, and Aloys purred along contentedly as ever. I purred less. After a few kilometers, I couldn't feel anything, anywhere. I mean it, masochists of the world, please write in. What is the appeal here, seriously?